What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Crossplay podcast. I'm Pastor Mark, and today I want to talk to you about just everything that's going on in the gaming world. I've taken a little bit of a break over the last few weeks because there wasn't a lot to play that was new, so I just kind of played old games, and I'll talk about that at the end. And I was busy doing my full-time job, doing church stuff. I was speaking over the last few weeks, leading worship in a few areas, so took a little bit of a break from gaming to focus on that, but I'm back at it, and I just want to talk about some of the things that have been going on over the last few weeks and catch you up on what I've been playing and what I'd recommend. So first, in terms of news, big news for God of War. The God of War release date has been announced for November 9. This was rumored to have been announced earlier in June, and then after those strong rumors about when they would announce the release date, they delayed it, and so the thought was, oh, maybe they're delaying it so they can kind of add some fanfare, maybe do a state of play, maybe make a bigger deal out of it, and then it just kind of like got released on Twitter and in a blog, and so it was like all that fanfare was kind of robbed from it. So I don't know, I feel like they could have made a slightly bigger deal out of it because this is like the game for PlayStation in the fall. But whatever, November 9, the game's going to sell well regardless of how big of a deal they make of it. So maybe that's why they're just like, whatever, just release the release date and then we'll be fine. What's interesting, though, about the release date is that it says November 9 now, but there was a leaked trailer or graphic or something that showed that the original release date was actually November 11, which was the Starfield release date, which is really interesting about whether or not PlayStation was targeting that because Starfield was going to release that day, and so they wanted to go head-to-head, or if they changed it to when Starfield was delayed out of November 11, and so they were going to take the place of Starfield, but for whatever reason, they chose to avoid that date specifically and go 2 days earlier. And I remember thinking when they announced November 9, that's a little odd because it's releasing on a Wednesday, and PlayStation Studios games never release on Wednesdays. They almost always release on Fridays, so that was a little interesting. So it seems like they were initially targeting that Friday, and then for whatever reason, maybe to not, they don't want to stir up the pot, they don't want to start a controversy or anything, they were like, whatever, we'll just release it 2 days earlier, we'll kick its butt, and it'll be fine. And then that will put it in direct competition with Skull and Bones, the Ubisoft pirate game that probably looks good for some people. I have no interest in it because it's going to be all online. I don't want to do that. That's coming out on that Tuesday, November 8, so I can imagine that those sales will be slightly impacted by God of War coming out the next day, but maybe those audiences don't overlap. I feel like they do a little bit, and I feel like most people on PlayStation are going to opt for God of War, not Skull and Bones. But all that to say, I'm excited for God of War. I'm not like clamoring for it. Like, it's not like, oh my gosh, I need to play that game tomorrow. I'm excited for it. I think God of War 2018 was a great game. I think it vastly improved on the old God of War games because Kratos was very annoying. He was not a well-built character, and they were able to build him and develop him in a way where it was like, gosh, this feels like a real person. This feels like a real character arc that he's going through. So hopefully that continues in the next God of War Ragnarok. I'm curious where they take the story because they've said this will finish the kind of Norse mythology arc that they're going on. It's only going to be those two games, and then I'm curious if they're going to even hint at where they'll go next, because my hope is they just kind of stop for a little bit, take a break, step away for 3, 4, 5 years, really work on what the next story should be, make sure it's worth going into, and then build that game out, because we don't need another God of War right away. Take a break, take your time, take your win, do some victory laps, and then come back with something great. That's my hope. We'll see if they do that. Next, I want to talk a little bit about Sucker Punch. If you don't know, Sucker Punch is one of PlayStation's other studios. They recently talked about, I think they put out a tweet or a statement or a blog or something, adding some clarity to their older IP, like Infamous and Sly Cooper specifically, and they said that no one, including them, nobody is working on any of these games, either in remasters or remakes or in new games, which to me makes sense, but it's also kind of a bummer. I mean, I love what Sucker Punch is doing now. Ghost of Tsushima is one of the best open world games there is. It perfects what Assassin's Creed has always been trying to do, to really perfect this kind of assassin combat, ninja feeling, sneaking around, but open combat works really well, and you have this great open world that feels alive, that feels like it's pulling you in different directions, that doesn't feel overwhelming in how it has icons everywhere. Like, Ghost of Tsushima is a great open world game, and so I want them to focus on that. And I feel like, gosh, there's so many stories that could be told in the Infamous universe. I know it's just another superhero game, but I feel like the way Sucker Punch tells those stories is so good. And the first two Infamous games specifically are so worth revisiting, at least in remake form, because man, there's a lot of great storytelling there that could be modernized for an audience, or at least do some spin-offs like Infamous First Light. The spin-off from Second Son is way better than Second Son. The character's great, the gameplay is great. You know, if it's not them, I wish someone in the PlayStation family, either a second party or maybe one of the smaller studios, would just get the opportunity to tell one of those stories or remaster one of those old games, because I feel like there's so much rich content there. So we'll see. I mean, Insomniac does such a good job of kind of parsing out their studios where, hey, you're going to work on Spider-Man, you guys are going to work on Ratchet and Clank, and they're just able to like crank out these games every 1.5 or 2 or 3 years, where I feel like that's the goal for the other PlayStation studios, is to set up support studios so that someone like Sucker Punch can work on 2 or 3 projects at a time, so we don't have to wait 5 years between every Sucker Punch game. We don't have to wait 5 years between every Naughty Dog game, between every Sony Bend game, between every Santa Monica game, So I think that's what PlayStation's trying to do, and I was hoping that Infamous would be a part of that. Sly Cooper, I don't really care much about. I don't know if anyone really is like dying to play a new Sly Cooper game. I think that would be cool. I think when you're comparing like mascot platformers like Ratchet and Clank versus Sly Cooper, I don't think a large audience would pick Sly Cooper over Ratchet and Clank because of what Insomniac has done with that. But I'm sure there's people out there that would care about it, and so that's where I think, like, gosh, I feel like you could contract that out to a smaller studio, just have them remake the first game, see how it does. If it bombs, great. I mean, that's easy for me to say because I'm not the one investing a lot of money in that. That would be Sony's decision. So I don't know. I was kind of bummed by that. I understand why they do that. I understand why they've made that decision, but I feel like, especially Infamous, like there's something there that could be really modernized well in the environment, especially when Sony is just dominating on the superhero side of things with Spider-Man. But then lastly, in terms of news, I want to talk about The Last of Us Part 1, because it just seems like they can't beat the leaks. If you remember back in the Summer Games Fest, I think it was, the Last of Us Part 1 trailer, the announcement trailer leaked the day before or the morning of the event, and so that announcement kind of got stolen from them because it got leaked, and now gameplay has leaked. There's about 2 minutes of gameplay that's leaked. And so I'm assuming they already had this planned because it's like a 10-minute video with full interviews and all that. But it released soon after the leak of them kind of explaining gameplay changes and visual fidelity changes and all of that. But all of these leaks and videos and conversation has kind of pushed people to ask the question of, is The Last of Us Part 1 just a cash grab? Is this really worth $70 for people to play The Last of Us? Again, if you remember, The Last of Us came out on PS3 in 2013. Naughty Dog remastered it for the PS4 in 2014, and now it's being remade. So this is the third Last of Us 1 release, and people are asking, is that really worth a full PS5 price of $70 for a game that this is now the third release, and it looks way better, but is it worth all of that money for basically the same game? And I understand that, but I want to talk through a few things, because I guess what I'm wrestling with is I don't know what people were expecting. Like when they said they remade The Last of Us from the ground up for the PlayStation 5, were people really expecting that the gameplay would be totally different? Like they're not remaking The Last of Us into Jak and Daxter or Uncharted. Like it's going to look like and feel like and play like The Last of Us. And so I don't know what people were expecting. Like they expected things to be totally different. Like Joel wouldn't move like Joel did in The Last of Us original. He moves now totally, like the animations are going to look similar. The gameplay is going to feel and look similar because they're remaking The Last of Us. And I think some of that remaking and smoothing out will probably feel different when you have the controller in your hands. I'm sure things will feel smoother. I'm sure things will click a little better than it did, because The Last of Us, because it was on PS3, because it was using that controller, probably just, like if you go back and play it, probably still feels a little clunky. Like the shooting probably feels a little slow and disconnected. Whereas now, hopefully, this is me hoping, hopefully that feels better. And one of the things they talked about too in this 10-minute kind of dev diary video was that the AI feels way different for this game because they have the resources of the PlayStation 5. They're able to kind of amp up all of the enemy AI, so they flank you better, they know where you are better, they communicate, they move around differently. And your buddies, your people, also understand enemy combat better. And so that was one of the critiques from The Last of Us back in 2013, was that you spend most of the game with Ellie. She is kind of your AI partner throughout the game, and there's random times where she'll just like run in front of an enemy, but the enemy can't see them. And the reason they did that is because they couldn't really control Ellie that well, and so they didn't want to punish you, the player, if the computer AI Ellie just runs in front of a clicker and screws you over. They don't want to do that. But now in this game, your partner is more aware of where the enemies are. So the goal would be that she's not just going to run out in front of the enemy and kind of ruin the immersion for you. And in terms of the other gameplay elements from Last of Us Part 2, some people were saying, like, why didn't they just take the gameplay from Last of Us Part 2 and plop it into Last of Us Part 1? And I think for some of the things, they probably tried to do that. And for other things, you'd have to completely redesign levels and puzzles and concepts, because there's things you can do in Last of Us Part 2 that you couldn't do in Last of Us Part 1. Like in Last of Us Part 1, you can't jump. So just having the ability to jump completely changes how puzzles and combat and interactions, all of that works within those environments. So to add a gameplay element like that, you'd literally have to redesign all of those gameplay structures. And again, that wasn't their goal. That's not what they're trying to do. This is meant to be the definitive experience for The Last of Us Part 1, not to be a gameplay copy of Last of Us Part 2. And so when I look at someone like Neil Druckmann, who was the creator, he co-created Last of Us with Bruce Straley. When I look at someone like Neil Druckmann and as he talks about this in interviews, I don't get the feeling that Neil Druckmann is doing this for a cash grab. I don't think he's just doing this to line his pockets with a little more money. I think he legitimately loves these characters. He loves this world. He loves The Last of Us. And so he wants to create this kind of modern expression, the definitive experience for someone to play The Last of Us. And that's certainly motivated by a few things. One, Naughty Dog can basically do whatever they want because they're probably Sony's most valuable studio next to Insomniac. And two, with the new HBO series coming out next year, I'm sure Sony and Naughty Dog and Neil Druckmann would like to have something that's a little more modern, that's a little more digestible, that's a little easier to access in terms of its playability for people that are experiencing this story for the first time. And also, knowing all of that, it's also obvious that Sony wants to make money. So in terms of the cash grab side of things, obviously Sony wants to make money. So they have no problem slapping $70 on top of it. I think that is a discussion worth having. Is it worth $70? Is it not worth $70? To me, that comes down to, if you don't think it's worth $70, don't pay that. It will be discounted at some point. Games always go on sale. Typically for Sony, it's about a month after it's released. You can probably get at least a $10 discount. So if you don't think it's worth $70, just wait. I know I'm part of the problem because I love The Last of Us, so anytime they release anything Last of Us gameplay related, I buy it immediately. I loved The Last of Us on PlayStation 3. I loved playing it on PlayStation 4. I loved playing most of The Last of Us Part 2, except towards the end. I think it got a little long and overstayed its welcome, but I loved that experience. And so when it comes to replaying The Last of Us again, but on PlayStation 5, revamped visuals, revamped gameplay, yeah, I want to do that. So I have no problem laying down the $70. If you do, don't pay it. That's how you send the message to Sony. You can complain all you want. We can complain about anything, but they want to make money. So at the bottom line, if they start making less money on things like The Last of Us, they will stop doing things like this, like in terms of remakes, remasters, money grabbing, things like that. So if you don't want to pay $70, I totally understand that. You can wait for it to go on sale, or you can just not buy it at all. That sends a bigger message to Sony that, hey, this game sold way, way less than the other versions of The Last of Us. Maybe we need to reevaluate how we're releasing products like this. But now I just wanted to cover some of the games that I'm playing. Like I said, there's really nothing new that's coming out. I mean, the last new game that I played was TMNT Shredder's Revenge, and then before that it was the Quarry. But it's been pretty quiet up until now when I just played Stray. I released a video on that. That was pretty good. I'm currently playing Multiverses, and I have a video on that as well. That's worth checking out as well, hopefully. But other than that, I've just been going back and playing games that I missed. Like I never got the opportunity to play Resident Evil 2 or 3, the remakes of that. And so with the PlayStation 5 versions being released, I picked those up. Resident Evil 2 is a great game. Like I fully understand now why people cling to this type of Resident Evil, where you have this really cool, like tight hallways and tight scenario where you get to know this environment really well, and it's good puzzle solving, and it's tense, and you have this character that chases you, and I hate that. It scares me too much. But it's a great game. I played it on the easy mode because I'm a baby and I don't like to be scared, and I don't like survival horror that makes me stressed out. So even on easy mode, there were times where I was stressed out, so that's the type of person that I am. But it was a great game. And then I played Resident Evil 3, and that was less less of a great game, but still a worthwhile experience. And then that's when I really started to feel like, oh, this is why people started to resist with Resident Evil 3, less so with 4, but definitely with 5 and 6, this kind of pull away from the original Resident Evil, because you see it so clearly in Resident Evil 2, and playing it back to back with Resident Evil 3 really showed me like, oh, this is where the developers decided to go in a different direction than what people actually wanted with that type of survival horror. And then because I was on a Resident Evil kick, I just kept going with it, so I picked up Resident Evil 7. Again, they had the PlayStation 5 version of this as well, so played through that, loved that, great game. That definitely goes back to those original Resident Evil 1 and Resident Evil 2 gameplay elements of puzzle solving and survival horror and lack of resources and all that. Great game, loved going through that. That was a blast. And then I just kind of got sucked down this old school rabbit hole, so I started playing Ocarina of Time on the Nintendo Switch. I bit the bullet and paid for the Nintendo 64 expansion, played it on there, and that just gave me a desire to go back and play more old school Zelda games. So I played Oracle of Seasons. I don't know if you guys ever played that on the Game Boy Color, but I loved Oracle of Seasons and Oracle of Ages. Those are such good Zelda games. So I played through Oracle of Seasons. That was a ton of fun. And then after that, that's when Stray and Multiverses came out. So that's basically what I've been occupying my time with. I'm excited for when more things will come out. I think that will come probably towards the end of August. There's Destroy All Humans, the new Saints Row, and then we get Last of Us Part 1, and then the other games that come out in the fall. So we're almost there. We're almost out of this kind of weird drought when it comes to gaming. So hopefully that just wraps up soon, and we'll be done with that. And then I like to end my podcast with some sort of devotional, some sort of thing like that. So if you're not into that, you're welcome to skip out. But I have this devotional that has been really beneficial to me. So if you want to stick around, I'm just going to read a little bit from Psalm chapter 2. We did Psalm 1 in the last podcast, so I'm just going to do Psalm 2 now. I'm going to read that, and then I'll unpack it a little bit. This is the book of Psalms, starting with Psalm 2. Why do the nations rage and the peoples plot in vain? The kings of earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, let us burst their bonds apart and cast away their cords from us. He who sits in the heavens laughs. The Lord holds them in derision. Then he will speak to them in his wrath and terrify them in his fury, saying, as for me, I have set my king on Zion, my holy hill. I will tell of the decree. The Lord said to me, you are my son. Today I have begotten you. Ask of me, and I will make the nations your heritage, and the ends of the earth your possession. You shall break them with a rod of iron and dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel. Now therefore, O kings, be wise. Be warned, O rulers of the earth. Serve the Lord with fear and rejoice with trembling. Kiss the Son, lest he be angry and you perish in the way, for his wrath is quickly kindled. Blessed are all those who take refuge in him. So that's a lot of words that can be hard for us to understand. But basically what the psalmist is saying, this is David writing this psalm, is that God has established and directed his kingdom. And no matter what the kingdoms of earth may attempt to do, God's purposes can't be thwarted. So basically, this is a psalm of warning, of trying to help people understand that the best side to be on is on God's side. No matter what happens in the world, no matter what happens in terms of circumstances in our personal lives or people around us, it's always best to be with God, to take refuge in God, to be safe in God, and to keep ourselves safe from the wrath to come, and to help us to understand that our goal is to bring others into that safety as well, not just to hoard it to ourselves. So hopefully that's an encouragement to you. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for sticking with it. Appreciate you. I always want to let you know that I'm praying for you. I've prayed for you as I've made this video, and if you have a specific prayer request, you can leave a comment in this video, or you can message me on Twitter, and I will pray for you specifically. So thanks for tuning in. Remember that God loves you. I'm praying for you, and I'll see you in the next video.